Release that pressure. Get up off of that thing and shake till you feel better.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm back. Can't say it like the Godfather soul, but I'm back, and I'm glad you're with us still in this hour. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. A great show so far, and I look forward to our conversation in this hour with Dr. James Smethurst about the black arts movement in the South and the ways in which the movement's radical roots, its ties to civil rights organizations, and its use of literature and performance help to advance the civil rights movement in this country as we know it. It seems to me that we spent a great deal of time over many decades now dissecting and reveling in the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and the 1930s, as we should have. And yet, I think I hear Dr. Smethurst suggesting to me that the black arts movement in the South, from the 60s to the early 80s, is an understudied black arts movement, a culture movement that was formed also by African-American artists and intellectuals and had a profound impact on the civil rights movement. That's what he essentially is getting us to focus on, not just the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s and 30s, but what about this sort of, Renaissance, this cultural movement in the South that impacted the movement as we know it. His book is called Behold the Land, the Black Arts Movement in the South. I am delighted to have on this program Dr. James Smethurst. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. It's really great to be here. How are you?
I'm well, man. Good to have you on the program. Thanks for taking the time to join us. A lot to get to in this hour, so let me jump right in. Am I right, first of all, about what I suggested a moment ago, that we spent a great deal of time, again, as we should, never enough time spent unpacking the impact of the Harlem Renaissance back in the 20s and 30s, but I think I hear you suggesting that what you want us to focus on as well, and what you spent your time researching and writing about, is this understudied black movement, black arts movement, as it were, in the South. True or false?
Yes, true. And in fact, I'd even go a little further and say that when we think about the black arts movement, or when we, for a long time when we thought about the black arts movement as related to the Black Power movement, we tended to think about the North and the West. We tend to think more about Chicago or Detroit or New York or Oakland or Los Angeles, and not Atlanta or Houston or Los Angeles or Memphis.
Mm-hmm. And since you went further, let me follow you further still and ask how it is that this movement in the South distinguishes itself from those other movements that you've just referenced in other parts of this nation.
Well, when you say distinguished, I think they all saw themselves as part of a larger moment and movement. But I think that the way that it becomes important, or is, they're for practical reasons and symbolic reasons. The practical reasons are then, as now, and basically forever in the United States, more black people live in the South than any other region of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
A little over half the black population of the United States lived in the South during that moment. And furthermore, pretty much this was before immigration changed sort of the demographics of the black community a little bit. Pretty much the vast majority of black people in this country had, even if they didn't live in the South, had some connection to the South. It might vary about what part of the South. Like if you were in Los Angeles, say, it might be Texas or Louisiana or Arkansas. If you
Mm-hmm.
lived in New York, it might be the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia. But so the practical reason is that once black arts and black power decides to put on an emphasis on the election of black officials and taking over local governments, taking over city governments, electing representatives, demographically, the South was the place it had to be, right? Because that's where most black people were. There were a few cities like Oakland or Gary or Newark, New Jersey, Detroit, Cleveland, where black people were a majority or close to a majority of the population, outside the South. But most of the cities of the South, they were already there. Atlanta, New Orleans, Jackson, Memphis, and so on. So, part of it was that what made it unique was because, for practical reasons, there are more black people there than any place in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And then black people were able to gain control of city governments, the black community, and then there was resources for the arts, especially in Atlanta, where Maynard Jackson, the first black mayor of Atlanta, decided that he wanted to be the culture mayor. So he put money into the arts. So that's part of it. I think the other reason is symbolic, right? In the United States, I think it's hard to think, if you think about black nationalism or ideas of black people, self-determination, the idea that black folks should do for themselves, should control their own destiny. Pretty much any vision of a black people or a black nation, the sort of ground zero in the United States is the South, symbolically. This is kind of, obviously there was slavery everywhere in the U.S. at one point or another, black people everywhere, but that was the epicenter of it all. And so I think, symbolically, the Behold the Land title comes from a speech by Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, in the 40s, where he's saying, talking about at a conference in the South, behold the land where your ancestors, you lived and died, and built that land, and blood shed on that land, and that this notion of the land of was very powerful. So I think that was a little long-winded way of saying it, but I think there are practical reasons and symbolic reasons, sort of emotional, even you might even say spiritual reasons why the South, particularly resonated in the movement.
You mentioned Maynard Jackson, a big smile came across my face. I love that brother dearly, miss him sincerely. The first black mayor of the city of Atlanta. Never met a guy who was nicer and kinder and just a great guy, smart guy, turned that city of Atlanta around.
Right.
Glad his name is now on the airport there, Jackson Hartsfield Airport. So I'm glad they got that done. But he's one of the two people I've met in my life. I've said this before, I think. I've met two folks in my life, politicians that is. If you met them and got to know them, just spend any time with them, you could not help but vote for them. And Maynard Jackson's one of them. If you met Maynard Jackson, he was going to get your vote because he was just the nicest guy. And whenever he talked to you, he could be in a room of 10,000 people, but made you feel like you were the only person in that room at that moment. I adored Maynard Jackson, former mayor of the city of Atlanta. When we come forward, we'll talk more about this black arts movement in the South and explore the ways in which we need to appreciate it and why it has been, in fact, undervalued over the years. And I also, my sense is, at least, and we'll get Dr. James Smethurst to unpack all this for us, my sense is that a black arts movement in the South may receive a certain kind of pushback because it is, in fact, in the South. That the black arts movement in the North or in the West might not have received. I don't know. He wrote the book. We'll unpack it, though, when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Let's get back to business, Los Angeles County. The Economic Opportunity Grant Program is now open. This program is designed to provide financial support to qualified small businesses, micro entrepreneurs, food industry businesses such as restaurants, and nonprofits in Los Angeles County. Approximately 4,600 grants of up to $2,500 each will be administered to qualified micro businesses that face barriers to accessing capital resources. To learn more about the Economic Opportunity Grant Program, visit www.grants.lacounty.gov. The application process is fast and easy. Don't miss the opportunity to get back to business. This program is administered by the County of Los Angeles through its Department of Economic Opportunity and funded in part through a grant from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. The application portal is powered by Lindustry. Visit www.grants.lacounty.gov and get back to business.
California is a great place to live and work, but those aren't easy things to do for students also going to college. That's why the state created the Californians for All College Corps, a way for students to build skills and help others while earning up to $10,000 for school. Commit to serve your community and we'll help you pay for college. Spots will fill up fast, so learn more and apply today at www.cacollegecorps.com. That's www.cacollegecorps.com. KBLA.com. California is a great place to live and work, but those aren't easy things to do for students also going to college. That's why the state created the Californians for All College Corps, a way for students to build skills and help others while earning up to $10,000 for school. Commit to serve your community and we'll help you pay for college. Spots will fill up fast, so learn more and apply today at www.cacollegecorps.com. That's www.cacollegecorps.com.
Like bones, your teeth lose density and become weaker over time, which can lead to tooth decay. And that can make your visit to the dentist feel like this. But if you want your dental visit to feel like this, try Crest Densify. Crest Densify actively rebuilds tooth density to extend the life of teeth by remineralizing enamel. Densify from Crest, the #1 toothpaste brand in America. Smile, Crest has you covered.
Did you know Nissan EVs have traveled 8 billion miles? Just a quick trip to Pluto and back. And what did we learn along the way? Well, that an EV can take on the world, like the Nissan Leaf. It can move racing forward and take your breath away, like the all-new Nissan Ariya. We learned to make EVs that electrify. 8 billion miles driven by Leaf owners globally since 2010. 2023 Ariya has limited availability. All-wheel drive expected availability early 2023, subject to change.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
We are talking in this hour about the black arts movement in the South from the 1960s to the early 1980s. You know all about the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s and 30s, but what about the black arts movement in the South and the ways in which it impacted the civil rights movement as we know it? Before we get to the impact on the movement, let me just ask Dr. James Smethurst, our guest in this hour, author of the book Behold the Land, a broad question, and give him some canvas to paint, and we'll go from there. The broad question, Dr. Smethurst, is for you to take some time to actually tell us about the black arts movement in the South from the 60s to the early 80s. Take your time.
Okay, so when we talk about the black arts movement in general, what we're talking about is the arts and culture movement of the black arts and culture movement of the 1960s and 70s that is really almost joined at the hip. I mean, really is not distinguishable from the black power movement. It includes, writers, it includes musicians, it includes visual artists, dancers, theater people. So, it's really the movement, even more than the Harlem Renaissance, that will put black art and black culture, front and center in the United States in a way that, kind of lays the ground for somebody like Toni Morrison, for example, who really starts out during the black arts movement to become get a Nobel Prize, to become, probably the most famous, maybe many people would say the best novelist of our lifetime, depending on how old you are. And the thing about the black arts movement that's, when you say movement, like Black Power, it's a complicated movement because even more than the Harlem Renaissance, it's happens pretty much every place that there are any campus, any community, any city, town where there's an appreciable number of black people. So that practically every black community in this nation had a theater or a bookstore or a poetry group, something like that. So that it's probably the most successful, in my view, unquestionably the most successful grassroots arts movement in the history of the United States. That, of course, makes it complicated because it's practically everywhere. Mm-hmm. Then, communities are different, right? New Orleans is not New York. New York is not Los Angeles. Los Angeles is not Richmond, California, which is not, Memphis. So, there's variations like that because the local traditions are a little different. The local politics, the demographics are different. So that's part of it. The other thing that makes the black arts movement complicated is that it's more like a network or a conversation about certain things like what are black people? What is black culture? Everyone agrees there should be black self-determination. In other words, black people should make their own future. But what would that future look like? There's all kinds of answers to those questions, and there's no, I guess you'd say there's no pope of the black arts movement. There's nobody who can say this is what it is or that is what it is. So there's a lot of debates and a lot of arguments, a lot of conversations that go on. But I'd say the thing that it does do that's really important is that it changes, besides, it produces a lot of great artists. I mean, Toni Morrison, Samuel L. Jackson, Spike Lee, Sonia Sanchez, Amiri Baraka. I mean, his career goes back before them, but really is really important. Bill Nunn, Radio Raheem and Do the Right Thing. Andrea Fry. I mean, you could go on and on about important artists that got trained and sort of came out of the movement. But also, it changes how everybody in the United States thinks about art and culture. The one thing is that the idea that art should be for the people, or that we should publicly support art. Before the Black Arts Movement, at least since the end of the New Deal, back then at the beginning, like say in 1962, the idea of public art in this country was basically Lady Bird Johnson's highway beautification program. There really wasn't a public sector. I remember the poet and critic and arts administrator A.B. Spellman saying to me that we invented, he said, the public sector. The idea that, tax money, public money, should go for public art that people could see, and not just in, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, or, pick your local art museum, elite art museum, but that it should be in your community. It should be in Crenshaw, it should be in Compton or Leimert Park or whatever, as well as in the Getty or something. And that was new. But nowadays we don't think anything about that. I mean, some people might try to defund that, but basically, and then the people rise up from all kinds of communities and beat those folks who want to defund back. Because we accept that, that this idea that public art for the people, somehow representing the people in their communities is normal. But that wasn't how it was before Black Arts. The other thing is that you can be serious and popular at the same time, because Black Arts is trying to change the world, like create an art that was supposed to appeal to, millions of black people, not just, 150 of your radical friends or a dozen of your radical friends, right? And they succeeded, really, if you think about it. And, now we consider that, Beyonce, who's maybe the most popular recording artist in the world. I don't know who is, but she must be pretty close. She'll record Lemonade, and has a lot of serious, very serious, or she'll do a thing referencing the Black Panthers at the Super Bowl halftime, and folks, some people will object, but her fans certainly think this is normal. But Sam Cooke couldn't do that back in the day.
Yeah, no, I take your point. Let me ask you a couple of things, given what you said already. The first thing is a question about the roots of this movement. You've talked about the movement.
Right.
I want to talk in a moment here about some of the artists that were created. You've given some names already that we can explore. Some of the artists who were created by this Black Arts movement in the South specifically. But tell me briefly here and quickly about the movement's radical roots.
Well, I think that the movement's radical roots is, if you look at the genesis of it, and these are all interlocking spheres, is first of all you have the historically black colleges and universities, because a lot of, besides the fact that you have a lot of students there who study politics, who study art, who study culture. And they train artists there. They train writers there. They train the teachers of artists. In other words, in the days when there were still segregated schools, a lot of the black art teachers for those segregated schools were trained at places like Spelman, Morehouse, Texas Southern, and so forth. So there's that piece. But these HBCUs, which are overwhelmingly in the South, their faculty was pretty radical. They had a lot of them had their people like Sterling Brown, for example, or the art department at Hale Woodruff at Atlanta University, Elizabeth Catlett at Hampton, among other places, John Biggers at Texas Southern. They have their roots back in the 30s and 40s in what we might call the Popular Front, the sort of left-wing circles that were around really the Communist Party. And that whatever one thinks about the Communist Party, retrospectively, it was a space where people felt that they could work for black advancement, black liberation, or Negro liberation, as they would have said back in the day. And a lot of these people were part of that. And they at a time when that was crushed during the 50s, they hang on at these schools in the South. So that's one part of it. Also, these people are immensely important to the civil rights movement, which, after all, basically, if you think about the black student movement, which, the SNCC and so forth, they come out of those very universities. And Sterling Brown mentors those people at Howard.
Were there ways in which the black arts movement in the South, because, again, it is in the South, was pushed back on in ways that black arts movement in other parts of the country might not have experienced?
Well, sure. Although, as we know from the experience of, say, the Black Panthers in California, or what happened to Fred Hampton in Chicago and so forth, I mean, the pushback in other places could be pretty severe. But having said that, I think you're right. But that was, in some ways, that was an advantage in the sense that, as far as I can tell, after a lot of study and talking to a lot of people, you didn't have the same kinds of bitter debates and conflicts in the South that you had in other parts of the country. You didn't have the struggle, like in Los Angeles, between Maulana Karenga, us, and the Panthers. Those sorts of things, or up north between Hakeem Madhubuti in Chicago and Amiri Baraka in Newark. In the South, that tended not to happen so much. I mean, not saying that everyone believed the same thing, but people seem to be been able to work together in a way without as much conflict as you found in some, like, say, the Northeast, the Midwest, and the far West. And when I asked people about it, their response was, well, the situation there, the people who you opposed was so, well, first of all, they had a lot of power. And secondly, the racists, the Klan. I mean, this is a period when Lester Mannix was, during some of it anyway, was an outright segregationist who handed out baseball bats and axe handles to beat up people who would sit in on his chicken restaurant in Atlanta. I guess what their sense was, the oppression was so great in the South that the forces that you were, facing were so powerful and so vicious that you didn't have the luxury of conflict that people had in other places. I mean, you just wouldn't survive. So, what I'm saying here is, I don't want to romanticize the South, but what I'm saying is that there was a sense that people, of alliance there that maybe wasn't as strong in some other places. I mean, look at Look at Maynard Jackson. Look who was in his campaign. I mean, you had everybody. You had Marxists. You had cultural nationalists. You had sort of Marxist cultural nationalists. You have what we might think of as sort of liberal, but not radical types. I mean, you had all kinds of folk who supported Maynard Jackson and worked in his campaign, and still think of him as like you do, very, very warmly. And I'm not sure that you have. I mean, if you look what happened in Newark with Kenneth Gibson and Baraka, they fell out.
Yeah. No, I hear your point about this sort of Southern solidarity that didn't exist in the North. I hear that. I take it, and that's why I wanted to ask that question about whether or not there was a pushback in the South and what the response was to that pushback. I hear you loud and clear. When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, I want to come to this notion you raised a moment ago that these artists, and you've listed some names of some great artists that come out of this black arts movement in the South. But you made the point that these artists found a way to be both serious and popular simultaneously, that they were both serious and popular at the same time. I'm wondering whether or not you think that today that duality is easier or harder to come by, to be both serious and popular at the same time, easier or harder now than during the genesis of the black arts movement from the 60s to the early 80s. We'll talk about that and a great deal more when we come forward with our guest in this hour, Dr. James Smethurst, talking about the black arts movement in the South. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
We may be LA's newest talk station, but when you're punching above your weight, it's not about whether you can throw a punch. Can you take a punch? We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. And we don't black down.
I'm Mike Island, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Officials with American Airlines are trying to stop a possible pilot strike as the Allied Pilots Association considers a work stoppage. President Biden says the nation's banking system is safe following the failure of two banks. The president said customers who had accounts with California's Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in New York will have access to their money starting today. Meanwhile, Wall Street is off to a turbulent start as the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell sharply at the opening bell but quickly turned around and rose more than 250 points. 11 gun safety bills are before Michigan lawmakers this week. They were introduced after the mass shooting at Michigan State University last month. They would create what are known as red flag laws, universal background checks, and safe storage laws. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Island from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Southern California Edison wants you to know that downed wires are dangerous. Never approach or touch a downed wire or anything in contact with it. Stay away and call 911. Stay alert. Stay safe. Learn more at sce.com/stay safe.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers missed a chance to get to 500 for the first time this season. They lose by 4 to the Knicks. UCLA gets the number 2 seed in the West Regional in the NCAA tournament. The Bruins will play their first round game against North Carolina Asheville Thursday night in Sacramento. USC made it. They'll play Michigan State Friday morning in Columbus, Ohio. Howard University, in the NCAA tournament for the first time in 31 years, plays top-seeded Kansas Thursday morning at 11. Shout out to all the Howard alumni around the nation. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by Original Taco Pete.
Aaron at Original Taco Pete's. Come in today for our tasty seasoned black taco. We're at 3272 West Slauson, off Crenshaw, or call 323-348-4441.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580 welcomes the U.S. premiere of the Bob Marley One Love Experience. Open now through April 23rd at Ovation in Hollywood. Enter to win a pair of VIP tickets on the KBLA app or KBLA1580.com. A One Love Experience poster, vinyl record, and souvenir. This has been a community call to action brought to you by KBLA Talk 1580.
Need legal help? Attorney Jovan Blacknell is an aggressive trial attorney specializing in criminal defense and civil litigation. Look no further than the law office of Jovan Blacknell. From personal injury to criminal defense, Jovan Blacknell has the knowledge to protect your rights. The law office of Jovan Blacknell understands the stress and anxiety that come with legal issues. That's why the law office of Jovan Blacknell supports the right to a fair trial. For Los Angeles Council member Mark Ridley Thomas, are you facing a legal battle? Log on to fightforjustice.com. Don't go through it alone. Let the law office of Jovan Blacknell fight for your rights. Log on to fightforjustice.com. Let the law office of Jovan Blacknell take the worry and stress out of your case. Call 310-469-9117 today for a free consultation. That's 310-469-9117 or log on to fightforjustice.com. Law office of Jovan Blacknell, where experience and dedication make the difference.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates Women's History Month, sponsored by Walmart. As we celebrate Women's History Month this month, KBLA Talk 1580 would like to spotlight women leaders in our community who are creating positive change. If you or someone you know is making a difference in your community, please nominate them with a 50-word or less post on why you feel they should be included in the KBLA Women's Series, sponsored by Walmart. These women leaders will be featured on KBLA, interviewed on KBLA, and participate in a panel discussion hosted by Reva Martin in real time. Visit the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to nominate a woman in your community that is creating positive change. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
World, where you headed?
I'm going to get a slice.
You going down the south? Word. I gotta make some deliveries and I'll check you back there, right?
Rebound.
Bet. All right. Oh shit! Let me check it out. That's the hype.
Newest, latest. Let me tell you the story of right hand, left hand. It's a tale of good and evil. Hey, it was with this hand that Cain iced his brother. Love. These 5 fingers, they go straight to the soul of man. The right hand, the hand of love. The story of life is this. Static. One hand is always fighting the other hand. And the left hand is kicking much ass. I mean, it looks like the right hand love is finished. But hold on, stop the presses, the right hand's coming back. Yeah, he got the left hand on the ropes now, that's right. Yeah, ooh, it's a devastating right and hate is hurt. He's down. Ooh, left hand hate KO'd by love. If I love you, I love you. But if I hate you,
Here it is, love and hate.
I love you, bro.
Wait, Raheem, check the leg. Peace.
Classic scene from a classic film, Do the Right Thing. I love that scene with Mookie and Radio Raheem and that powerful discourse. on love versus hate. We're talking in this hour with Dr. James Smethurst about the black arts movement in the South and why it's been so understudied and all the greats that were created by this black arts movement in the South. Prior to news, traffic, and sports, Dr. James Smethurst said to me and to you that this movement created a lot of artists. A lot of artists were created out of this black arts movement in the South. Artists who found a way to be both serious and popular. It's not easy to do, to be both serious and popular at the same time. Spike Lee has pulled that off. He's done serious work, and yet he's popular. One of any number of artists, Toni Morrison, referenced earlier in this conversation, has done serious work, obviously popular to the point of winning a Nobel Prize for her work. And so I was asking, or said I wanted to ask Dr. Smethurst when we came forward, as we have now, whether or not it's become easier or more difficult as an artist out of the South or any place else in black to be both serious and popular. Take that any way you want to take it, Dr. Smethurst.
Well, that's a really good question. It's something I think about. And I would say, probably easier than when these folks started out, right? Because we're used to the idea. I mean, if you think about hip-hop then, it's great hearing Public Enemy there, and though they're more of a Long Island, but,
sure.
They have their connections to the South as well as other places, Caribbean. But that you think about hip-hop, I mean, first of all, I don't know if you would say that the conscious, or whatever you want to call it, sort of more politicized part of hip-hop is the dominant one, but that everybody who's into hip-hop, any hip-hop fan in the subculture, knows that is a stream of hip-hop, that they listen to it, it's there, it's respected. So I think that there's whether you're talking about Talib Kweli, or even going back in the day to Public Enemy, or before them to Grandmaster Flash or Africa Bombata, up until the present moment, if people who we more associate with that, Kendrick Lamar, Common, or folks, or even Beyonce, who's definitely from the South. I mean, she and Jay-Z are part of that long-standing sort of Louisiana, Texas, Los Angeles continuum, I guess you'd say. She almost embodies it. But so they're those folks that do the so that's part of the people are into that stuff. I mean, someone like Beyonce is amazing in the sense that, I mean, if you get into her fans, the really hardcore fans, the so-called Bayhive, that what they love about her, love to talk about her, is they're into interpretation. They talk about what she's trying to say, what it means. They like to break it down that kind of way, in a way that I can't think of too many artists like that before. So there's that piece. But the other thing is that I think it's worth noting, and I see that I can draw a line from this to the Black Arts Movement, particularly in the South, is also people who we might not think of as conscious hip-hop artists, nevertheless feel free and empowered and maybe even almost obligated to occasionally do what we might think of as conscious songs. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think about Lil Wayne, right? Most people don't think of him as a real political guy, really, in any normal sense. And yet, God Bless America is probably the most intense indictment of like what we might think of as post-Katrina racism, than visceral than almost anything I've ever heard or seen. If you watch the video, mm-hmm. Similarly, DMX, we don't think of him as really being a conscious rapper, I don't think, but Who We Be is extraordinarily powerful. So I guess the short form is, I think it's easier, harder. It's hard for me to judge, but I mean, still, it's very, very possible to do it. In a way, I think I would almost flip it and say that it's almost easy, that in a sense, if one, because I like that your station is what is it, unapologetically progressive?
You got it.
Yeah, well, so that there is this sort of unapologetically progressive aspect of black literature, black culture, black music, some of the most popular forms, black theater, black dance. What's interesting is that the culture, in a sense, is almost ahead of our politics. Because you got. I've been thinking a lot about this lately. It's more like a progressive movement of feelings, because there aren't really mass progressive organizations in any sense. Not that I can see what some people might call the left. What we call the left in this country is not really much of a left. And I'm not saying that critically. I'm just saying that there aren't mass organizations like there have been even in this country at certain times or other countries. What we do have, though, in culture is this progressive, if you will, especially led by black people, sort of kind of movement of feeling, of sentiment. And so, what I'm saying is I think, again, this is something that black art's changed, and I think it's still it's still very much with us, and thanks to hip-hop. What's more popular than that?
Yeah, I think,
don't know.
No, nothing more hegemonic than that these days, no question about that. And yet, to your point about culture and politics, I think that's always been the case inside of black America. In our community, our culture has always led the politics for two reasons. Number one, that's just what we do. We are a people that has an imprint that is undeniable on the cultural landscape of this nation.
Right.
And for so long, as you well know, you're the professor here, we were left out of politics. We were boxed out of politics. So all we had was, in fact, our culture. All we had to speak for us was, in fact, our art. So it seems to me that certainly inside of black America, the culture has always been ahead of the politics. So no surprise there. On that point, at least. When we come forward, Dr. James Smethurst, we'll talk more about the black arts movement in the South, and specifically, which we haven't really gotten into in detail, the ways in which this black arts movement impacted the civil rights movement as we know it. More of that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Has child support suspended your license? Illegal. Has child support been reported on your credit report? Illegal. Log on to childsupportisfraud.com for more information.
KBLA Talk 1580 would like to thank all of the businesses that tune into KBLA at work. We celebrate you, your calls to the station, and your overall support. To show our appreciation, we would like to treat your office to lunch for 10, sponsored by John O'Groats family-owned restaurant and johnogroats.us. Open the KBLA Talk 1580 app or log on to KBLA1580.com to submit your office to be selected for our Office of the Week. We know you're just like our staff, putting in many hard, smart working hours per week. We just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. You and your staff deserve lunch on us. Enter your office to win lunch for 10 and be highlighted on KBLA Talk 1580 as our Office of the Week. Open the KBLA app or log on to KBLA1580.com to enter your office today to become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. Sponsored by John O'Groats family-owned restaurant and johnogroats.us. Become the KBLA Talk 1580 Office of the Week. This has been a KBLA Talk 1580 community call to action.
All I really want is to be happy. KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in celebrating Women's History Month. I'm Dominique DePrima. Join me and Black Lives Matter Los Angeles for a reclamation in honor of Breonna Taylor. It's called Black Women Are Divine. There'll be food, music, performances, and healing services, all free. It's a space for Black women, girls, and femmes to receive love and healing, and for others to express their appreciation. Many of the 26 BLM grassroots chapters across the nation are participating in this honoring of the memory of Breonna Taylor on the anniversary of her death. It's taking place on Saturday, March 18th from noon to 4 p.m. at Norman Houston Park, 4800 South La Brea in Los Angeles. It's the park at the summit. For special parking options and more information, visit blmla.org. That's blmla.org. Celebrate Women's History Month with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Watching my clock here, Dr. Smethurst, give me some sense, if you will, of how the Black Arts Movement in the South profoundly impacted the Civil Rights Movement as we know it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think it was, I guess what you would say, a symbiotic relationship. I mean, between the two of them. I mean, there's a way in which a lot of the Black Arts Movement in the South comes out of civil rights. I mean, I don't mean like just, you know, in an ideological or political sense, but I mean literally, like if you look at like the Free Southern Theater, which was for a bedrock of the Black arts community in New Orleans. It starts in Mississippi at Tougaloo College by these Gilbert Moses, Doris Derby, and John O'Neill, these three civil rights workers who are part of basically SNCC, who are movement people who then start a theater. Or if you think about Black arts in Atlanta, a lot of it happens because people are there, or there's this sort of, partly it's because of the density of historically Black schools, but as they interlock with the civil rights movements like SNCC, SCLC, and so forth that are headquartered there, and that there's this sort of community out of which the Black arts and Black power communities grow. But, I mean, then conversely, you know, you could say, you know, depending on how you define the civil rights movement, like, again, with Maynard Jackson, that there's this sense that, you know, sort of Black civil rights, or you could say Black empowerment, that a lot of the people on his staff, people who worked in his campaign, people like the poet Ebon Dooley, Michael Lomax, Pearl Clegg. I mean, these are people who all worked hard for later Jim Alexander, for Maynard Jackson. They were part of this cultural movement that Jackson used to, in a sense, build Black power in Atlanta. You know, it wasn't just about, sort of the norm, what you think of the normal civic things, but he had this sense of using culture to reach out to different communities, to empower different communities, to build a certain kind of spirit. And so, then, Atlanta comes to be I don't know, can you think of a city in the United States where a certain kind of Black political, cultural, and economic power has been more manifest in Atlanta?
I think it is the Black arts capital of the South, no question about it. I would call it just that, straight out. It is the Black arts capital of the South. There's a lot.
Well, and if you don't mind me saying this, continuing that, I would say too, it's what puts Atlanta on the map. The Black arts movement and interacting with civil rights and Black power is what puts Atlanta on the map as a capital of culture of the United States. It was in some ways a backwater before Black arts, and now it's on the main line.
Nope. I take that point. Two questions when we come forward in our remaining moments with you that I want to tackle. One is how this Black arts movement, particularly in the South, this is true for the Black arts movement anywhere in the nation, I suspect, but in the South, how did they stay focused on their work and witness and not get sidetracked or get impacted by negatively the normative white gaze? Because they're doing this in Atlanta, which is Black, but all around that is a bunch of white. And I'm curious as to how in your research you've determined that they did their work so well, but did it in the midst of this sea of whiteness around it, but not get impacted by that white gaze. And then I want to close, of course, by asking what the Black arts movement in the South means for this conversation, what their contribution was, put another way, to the conversation about what it means to be human. We'll close on that note when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nubs. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised. Brother.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, ma. House shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 joins you in standing for voting rights. When We All Vote is a leading national nonpartisan initiative on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election by helping to close the race and age gap. Created by Michelle Obama, When We All Vote brings together individuals, institutions, brands, and organizations to register new voters across the country and advance civic education for the entire family and voters of every age to build an informed and engaged electorate for today and generations to come. When We All Vote empowers their supporters and volunteers to take action through voting, advocating for their rights, and holding their elected officials accountable. Please visit whenweallvote.org to stand up for your rights, voting rights. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Periods don't care what you're doing, but your pad should. Get Always Triple Protection System in Always Day and Night Pads. Always Day Pads protect when active by wicking away gushes 2 times faster than leading store brands and giving us up to 100% leak-free and odor-free comfort. When we size up our pad at night, we get the same triple protection, plus up to 75% more coverage in the back for when we're laying down. No matter what, Always has you covered, day and night.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. James Smethurst, how did these artists who were a part of the Black Arts Movement in the South, 1960s, early 1980s, go about having such a huge impact, as you detail in this book, Behold the Land, without being vulnerable to or impacted negatively by the normative white gaze all around it?
Well, I don't want to go too far. I'd say that it wasn't that they weren't impacted by the gaze and also impacted by the political, I don't want to say material political moves. In other words, what happened in the Reagan administration, for example, when they got rid of the Comprehensive Educational Training Act, or CETA, which employed a lot of people in the theaters and whatnot, that had an impact. There's no question about that. Like other places, things went down. I think, though, what happens is that, for one thing, partly because of the demographics of the cities and some of the countryside, is that they are able to preserve more institutions. And they also, again, I think because there wasn't as much intra-group conflict, that things survive. So if you look at some place like Atlanta, though it's had some difficult moments, the Black Arts Festival, which was conceived by Michael Lomax, continuing the legacy of the Black Arts movement. I mean, what is that? It draws sometimes 500,000 people?
Oh, yeah, or more.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got to say that there's nothing in New York like that. Definitely not anything in Boston like that. I mean, even Los Angeles, even in its heyday, the Watts Festival drew a lot of people, but not that many.
Yeah.
And so, they I think have managed it because they were able to become institutionally embedded in certain kind of ways, politically, economically, and then culturally that were hard to dislodge.
No,
I mean, there were losses, and that also, because of the certain kinds of demographics and an increase of black political power in some ways, in the cities at least, they're able to do stuff that, other places. I mean, who is more radical than Chokwe Lumumba?
Yeah, it may very well be the case. I know Michael Lomax, knew him when he was mayor, of course. That may be his greatest contribution to the city. That Black Arts Festival is a big deal
right.
in Atlanta. It may be the crown jewel of all of his accomplishments as mayor of that city. I've got about 90 seconds left. Let me close on this note.
Okay.
This is the ultimate question, it seems to me. What did the Black Arts Movement, what has it contributed to this conversation about what it means to be human?
Well, I think it means that art is necessary for all of us, and art that speaks to all our conditions, all our interests, all our psychology, and it should be available to all of us in the communities where we actually live. And that Black people, the Black Arts Movement in the South, they led that struggle, and and it's also I would say in terms of the South is. South was always on the front burner as far as music goes.
Right.
But in other forms of art, the South, Houston, and Atlanta, New Orleans, Richmond, and Raleigh, so forth, are now, in a way, the most important, on the front burner in terms of culture in the United States. It's not just New York and Los Angeles anymore, and that was Black Arts.
Nope, I couldn't agree more, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation about the impact.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it immensely. The impact and the import of the Black Arts Movement in the South, as detailed in his book, Behold the Land, written by Dr. James Smethurst. Dr. Smethurst, good to have you on. Thanks for your insights and your sharings, and we'll do it again, sir. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, thanks. This was a pleasure.
Pleasure,
it was an honor.
Pleasure's all mine, and an honor. Thank you, sir. That's our show for today. Time to make room now for the KBLA Midday Money Chain. Up next, the Millionaires Roundtable with Lynn Richardson, to be followed by Ahead of the Crypto Curve with Naja Roberts. Old money, new money. Either way, we got you covered here on KBLA Talk 1580. Until tomorrow morning, Lord willing, thanks for tuning in, and as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Island, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Officials with American Airlines are trying to stop a possible pilot strike as the Allied Pilots Association considers a work stoppage. President Biden says the nation's banking system is safe following the failure of two banks. The president said customers who had accounts with California's Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in New York will have access to their money starting today. Meanwhile, Wall Street is off to a turbulent start as the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell sharply at the opening bell but quickly turned around and rose more than 250 points. 11 gun safety bills are before Michigan lawmakers this week. They were introduced after the mass shooting at Michigan State University last month. They would create what are known as red flag laws, universal background checks, and safe storage laws. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Island from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information